Welcome back to more Summoner's War Monster Strategies. Today we're going to be looking at the Fire Viking known as Geoffrey. Unlike the first two Vikings, the first one being mediocre and the second one being pretty terrible, this Fire Viking is actually pretty good. The main reason, well, first of all, it's because he's a 3-star, so that's, the first reason. His stats are actually higher than Walter and Huga, so that's a plus. In addition, his passive is actually quite interesting, although it did get nerfed over the last year and a half or so. I don't remember when exactly, but he used to be a hell of a lot better. Nowadays, he's kind of ditched, but he still has some use and a lot more use than, Walter and Huga. So let's talk about this. The stats as a level 46-star are as follows. They are 8565 HP, 571 attack, 670 defense, and 97 speed. So the HP is average. Attack stat is a little bit under, or average 2, I guess, high 500s. Not terrible, but not good either. Defense is actually pretty good, respectable. Any defense close to 700 is pretty respectable. And the speed, 97, below average. So, even though he does have better stats than the other two, the stats of this Viking are just not amazing. They're pretty good, but not amazing. So, let's talk about the skills now. The first one is Throwing Axe. Attacks with a flying axe and inflicts continuous damage for 3 turns with a 30% chance. Second one, Crushing Armor. Attacks an enemy and decreases the enemy's defense for 2 turns. The damage increases accordingly to your current HP situation. And the third one, Marauder passive. Recovers HP by 30% of the inflicted damage, also stealing 1 beneficial effect. Okay. This passive makes him interesting. First of all, he used to be a much better monster because this passive used to never be resisted. This passive could never, ever be resisted. It was pretty freaking insane. Basically, you could steal anything, invincibility from, like, all the time from, like, PvP, or back when the dragons B10 actually had invincibility instead of immunity, because immunity is the only one that can't be stolen, but, everything else, yeah. So, it was just like, it was amazing, He could not be resisted, and he would just be stealing invincibility from the dragons. That was his main use, dragons B10, but in recent days, his days are somewhat done, unfortunately. I mean, he's not bad, but his days are done compared to what he was before. The second one does more damage if you have more HP. If you take damage and have less HP, it'll deal less damage, so just a heads up on that. And the first one, DOT usage, and it can improve up to a 70% chance with skill ups. So, pretty interesting monster, but just not an amazing monster anymore, unfortunately. Let's talk about the rune recommendations. So, there were a few, but the one that I was able to see the most, or the ones I should say, was basically to make him fast and give him extra turns. So with that being said, you want to give him either Swift or Violent. Swift is generally for early to mid game. Later on, Violent in general, and especially for PvP. Also Swift, again, the whole argument, if you just want consistency and not deal with the whole RNG, take Swift, but in general, Violent will give you a lot more success late in the game, so it's better to use Violent. And also use a Focus and a Nemesis, Focus for more accuracy, Nemesis for more turns, because, combining a Violent or Swift with a Nemesis is a pretty good combination, he'll get a lot of turns. So, that's what I should say about the runes, that it is all about speed for this guy, because his slot 2 also requires speed, slot 4 HP to make him tanky, and slot 6 accuracy. He does need accuracy because, you want to make that passive work as often as possible to try and steal beneficial effects every time he attacks. In addition, his first and second skill will also benefit from more accuracy, so pretty good. And a pretty good setup right there. But that's all I can say about this guy. So again, if you want to keep this guy, I mean, go ahead. He's not a bad monster, but he's just not amazing, he doesn't shine like how he used to back then. Also, this guy is somewhat unpopular now. Well, I mean, he's always been somewhat unpopular compared to other monsters because of the way he looks. Yes, people judge even characters in games, or like monsters in games. But yes, people judge monsters by their looks. It just tells us something about about people. I mean that as a joke, but no, seriously. People don't like how this guy looks, and they're like, oh man, I can't use this guy on my team because he looks terrible. Like, he just does not look like OP, like cool, Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't really say that about a monster. It's just a freaking monster. It's a sprite image, but whatever, that's a different story. Anyway, that is my overall review. So again, go ahead and keep him if you want. If you need A pretty decent monster that can actually deal with beneficial effects on the opponents. Also keep in mind, if you use them in PvP later in the game, the enemies have high resistance, or even like TOA, hard later on. High resistance. His passive can be resisted now, so it's a bit dangerous. It's not consistent. That's the problem with, using him. So it's debatable if you should keep him or not nowadays. Back then, for sure yes. Nowadays, not anymore. So go ahead and leave a rune recommendation if you have any recommendations on how to use this guy properly. I'm sure that people would appreciate that. Thank you for watching. Goodbye everybody, and until next time.